What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Good View Woodworks channel. My name is Nathan, and in this video we're gonna go over the top 5 worst epoxy mistakes. Okay, these mistakes happen all the time. I get questions about these things all the time, so we're gonna go over them one by one, 1 through 5, starting with the most popular and ending with the least popular but still really popular. All right, check it out. Mistake number 1. This is by far the biggest mistake and the mistake that causes the most problems, okay? Mistake number 1 is not mixing the epoxy properly, okay? If you check out in most of my videos, I always say to make sure that you're scraping the sides and the bottom of the bucket at all times during the mixing process, and we want to mix between 3 and 5 minutes with a drill mixer. The reason why I say this is because if you don't mix thoroughly, you will get clumps of unmixed epoxy in the middle of the project. It can cause soft spots, and it can cause other reactions to happen to your river in your river table. And we want to avoid that. Most of the time you see it when you're sanding or planing, you'll get this rubbery spot that will not come out, and you cannot fix it unless you dig it out and you apply more epoxy. So you definitely don't want to do that. It makes it a terrible time when you're doing your project and you're almost finished just to realize you messed up. We definitely don't want to do that, all right? Mistake number 2. Now, mistake number 2 is using the incorrect type of epoxy, okay? And what I mean by that is using tabletop epoxy, for example, to fill a large void. It's not meant for that. Tabletop epoxy is meant for between an 1/8 inch and a 1/4 inch max. So you don't want to be using tabletop epoxy to fill large voids. On the flip side, it works the same way. You definitely don't want to be using casting epoxy to fill small voids, 1, because it's a waste, and 2, it takes a much longer time to set up, and you definitely don't want to be doing that. Now, the casting epoxy will still set up fine, it just takes a really long time. But if you pour too much tabletop epoxy, it can smoke and steam and crack and ruin your piece of lumber and your epoxy project. Once again, that's a lot of time and money wasted. You definitely don't want to do that either, okay? Mistake number 3. Now, mistake number 3 comes down to poor form prep. And if anybody has been doing, if any one of you guys has ever been doing a river table project in the past, you probably have come across the time when you forgot to seal your form properly and it leaked out, had a large leak. I get questions about this all the time, like what to do when it starts leaking, and really there's nothing you can really do when it starts leaking except for build a dam further out to give it some time to set up so the epoxy doesn't meet that dam, right? So you want to build it up as best you can, but really if you prep your form properly, you won't have any leaks. And if you guys have watched any of my other videos, you'll notice that I caulk not only the inside corner, but also where the boards meet for the perimeter. This is key. Also, using the right mold release really helps too. What I like to use is the Good View Woodworks tape, which you can go over to goodviewwoodworks.com and go get yourself some. It works really well as mold release, 3 inches wide, and you can really get the form taped up very quickly. Now, you can tape an entire 4x8 sheet of MDF only using 1.5 rolls of this tape. Okay, so a little goes a long way, and it's totally worth it. All right. Another thing is to use 100% silicone caulk. That way it peels up easily, but also it creates a nice seal so that epoxy cannot leak out. Okay. Remember, seal your form properly. Mistake number 4. Now, mistake number 4 is poor slab preparation. And what I mean by that is a few things. 1, not removing all the bark and getting all of the dirt and stuff off of it before you pour your epoxy. But not only that, making sure that your slabs are the correct moisture level, okay? And we want something below 12%. 12% or below works really well for moisture content. And you can get a moisture meter, which I have done a review on in this video right here. And that is a great tool to use to make sure your slab is prepped properly, okay? So go check out that video. It'll tell you more about checking the moisture content in your slab. But also, the last thing too, I see a lot of people making this mistake when you're pouring river tables, and that is sealing the edges. I have had issues. I know a lot of people who do this a lot have also had issues. Some people don't, but it's not worth the trouble. Do not seal the edges when you're pouring a large mass of epoxy for a river table. Use the correct type of epoxy. We're going back to step number 2. But the reason is that epoxy, you want that epoxy to soak into the edge of the river table and create a really good bond. And because this casting epoxy takes so long to set up, it really has a lot of time to soak in and give you a very strong bond. So I really recommend doing that. That's the best thing that you can do. All right. And last but not least, mistake number 5. This mistake is not as common as the rest, but I know it's a very common mistake. And that mistake is having the incorrect temperature. Now this is a big one. If it's too cold when you're pouring a casting epoxy, it's going to take a super long time to set up, and it may not fully set up to the correct hardness. Okay, we definitely don't want a flimsy or soft river, especially when making a large river table. But on the opposite end, you don't want it to be too hot. This can cause cracking, can cause bubbles, it can cause your river table to really get messed up after you pour, and you have a really big chance of wasting a lot of epoxy. The good news is it's a simple fix. You can add a fan, or you can add a window unit, which I did in a previous video, which I will link down in the description. So temperature is a really big thing. You want to have it around 70 to 75 degrees. That is ideal. If it's not, you can always add a fan to cool things down, but we really want to keep the temperature down so it doesn't crack, create bubbles, and mess up your project. And with that being said, guys, that is it for this video. I want to thank you for watching. I hope this can save you a lot of money and time from avoiding these mistakes. And as always, guys, thanks for hanging out with us.